The next artist I want to stop at here is the artist Caravaggio. And he had a very troubled life, and he actually ends up spending some time in jail, and he's an interesting figure. But he begins to make paintings like this, and this is Bacchus, painted between the years of 1595 and 1596. And you can see, first of all, what I've said before is with the Baroque paintings, we have this very dark background, like no background really. It becomes more theatrical or stage-like, and we have this extreme use of light that's coming in this way. So first, things that you might notice. You might also notice right away, it's a really beautiful painting. The details of it are very, very well done. And this is the style of Baroque. We're going to have these very realistic kind of depictions of the human body here. And we have here Bacchus. But Bacchus is the god of wine. But here Bacchus is depicted not as an older person, but as a teenager. Maybe a young boy. He's got some muscles on him and stuff. So, you think like 18, 19, in that time frame. And he's partaking in drinking wine, and he offers us, the viewer, a large glass of wine. And when we look at his eyes, how they're kind of droopy, and his cheeks and hands are flushed, we can assume that he has also partaken in some wine. And then we have on the table here, it might be hard to see, but you have fruit, but some of the fruit is actually rotting. And is no longer edible. And so there have been a number of interpretations of this painting. And probably the most, the leading interpretation, let's say, of this painting is that this was a homoerotic painting. And again, I say that, there's a lot of sexual connotation in this art at this time in the Baroque style. So it's a homoerotic painting which would have been created for somebody then that perhaps liked young boys. And, this idea of getting a young boy drunk and having your way with him is then implemented or implied in this painting. Another image from Caravaggio is he was hired to create paintings in this church in Rome, and he painted this one, and then there's another one over here that you can't see. Now, normally we've seen things like this where the artist would go in and do fresco painting. Instead, Caravaggio chooses to do oil on canvas, and so he actually creates the paintings away from the space in his studio and then comes and installs them, which is quite different than most people at this time would have been creating this art. And in fact, when he puts the paintings in place, they cause a little bit of a scandal. So this is one of the paintings. This is this painting. And it is the Calling of St. Matthew. And again, it looks like it's a stage. It really does. Like, this is a theatrical production. This is a backdrop of some kind. And we're witnessing some scene from a play. It's very dark, with then this extreme light coming through, this light that lights up the faces. It's, again, really beautifully done in the way it's painted. So why is it that people would have been so upset about this? The reason being is that he takes this biblical story and he puts these characters into everyday kind of dress. He doesn't show them as saints or anything. He shows them as just like the average person dressed and how people will be dressed for this kind of day around 1590 in Rome. So this is problematic for many of the viewers and causes problems for Caravaggio. And the next Italian painter I want to talk about, her name is a little hard to say. It's Artemisia Gentileschi. So Artemisia Gentileschi. And she's one of our few female painters that we talk about during this time period. Her father was a painter, a well-known painter, and so she took to art quite early by just being around him in his studio. And he did see that she had some talent, so he hired tutors for her to learn her studies and learn how to paint. And unfortunately, as a young teenage girl, one of these tutors then had his way with her. And she was very devastated by having been raped and confessed to her father what had happened. And there was a trial that then took place where the tutor was accused of raping her. But at this time period, it was really looked upon as if you were raped, it was because the girl somehow seduced the man. It was always the girl's fault. And so things were kind of stacked against her from the get-go. And then the fact that she was studying and being educated in painting, which were not usually done by women, also didn't help the situation. And so the trial took place, and she was actually under oath tortured by having her hands put like this and rope intertwined between her fingers, and then twisting the rope on her fingers until her fingers were bleeding to see if she was actually telling the truth. And she said, nope. She kept saying, nope, he raped me, he raped me. So he was actually convicted of raping her, but he was supposed to leave the town and move elsewhere, but he didn't, and no one really upheld the verdict of the trial. So she ends up having to leave and move elsewhere in Italy, and she ends up settling elsewhere, and she gets married, and she has a career and everything. But it just kind of shows you the situation that women were facing at this time period. So she paints this painting in this Baroque style, as you can see, where we have this very dark background and this really extreme light. And this is called Judith and Her Maidservant with the Head of Holofernes. And this is a story that she revisits in her art a bunch of times. So Judith was an Israelite, and Holofernes was one of the Assyrian generals. And if you remember all the way back from the beginning of this semester, the Assyrians were people that actually displaced the Jews. And so they were battling one another. And so the story goes from the Old Testament that Judith said that she would go into the camp and she would kill Holofernes, because if one of the men went into the camp, they would, of course, be stopped right away and, probably killed. But as a woman, she probably wouldn't be stopped and questioned. So Judith goes with one of her maidservants and finds the tent of Holofernes, and she chops his head off. And then she takes his head and puts it in a sack or something like that, and then brings it back to prove that she had killed Holofernes. And so that's what's being painted here. But the thing is that this is a self-portrait of Artemisia. So Artemisia Gentileschi uses herself in the position of Judith, and the face down here of Holofernes is actually a portrait of the man who raped her. And so it's kind of, playing maybe out some kind of, cathartic kind of experience for her of killing the man who raped her. in this painting, and as I said, this is a scene that's revisited a number of times in her artwork. And it's very interesting in that sense, in the story of her life, very sad, but interesting as well, and showing, you know, what the plight of women was in the 1600s.